in your book, you mentioned something that this is going to get really personal. I know we discussed it prior, but I'm curious about it. So obviously, my father died on September 11th, and then I found out shortly after that you had some experiences with 9/11, and that was the investigation or search to confirm deaths via the people in the debris, so body parts and whatnot. So obviously, this is a very head-on discussion, having lost my father in that ruckus of 9/11. And I remember the first time, not the exact moment, but I just remember hearing it about the confirmation that my dad passed. I feel like it wasn't until years later. There was no need for my family to tell me that at a young age. But it was a weird experience hearing how they confirmed my father died in the towers, where they had to find him. And obviously, as grotesque as it is, they didn't find him in one piece. And that's just like it goes back to the idea of sugarcoating facts and this or that. Like, I don't have to think about that. When I do think about it, it's sad, but it's also, this is what it was. Mm-hmm. And so I've come to a point in my life where I'm okay talking about it. So what was that experience for you? And what is that process of confirming deaths on September 11th in such a way that, it's not normal, without saying?
No, it's just so abnormal. Let me say first how sorry I am for your loss. For a child to lose their parent is life-altering. But to lose your parent in a major part of history is disorienting. And I'm not surprised at all that you have a podcast about death, because it's life-altering. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing about 9/11. You may have heard it said that one death is a tragedy and 1,000 deaths is a statistic. No, it's not. When you're walking through the rubble of 2 skyscrapers and there's fire and smoke and rubble all around you, and you're thinking 2,000 dead, 3,000 dead, we don't know yet, maybe 10,000 dead. The tendency is to think in that big number. And then here's what you see in the rubble. A desk calendar that says lunch with Jim, 12:30. I saw one of those pen sets that's got a golf ball in it, the souvenir of a hole-in-one, a little pen, and it was squashed. Something from a guy's desk that brought him so much happiness. Cards, birthday cards from from their colleagues. The paper was not destroyed. There were acres and acres and acres of paper flying through the air, too light to be destroyed. And so it was all spread out before us. So you saw these things like, scribbled notes, doodles on a scratch pad. And every one of those things tells you, this is not 1,000 people, it's not 10,000 people, it's one person, one at a time, a person who was a universe unto themselves. They had family, children, husbands, wives, parents who loved them and formed part of their universe. They did things in the world that maybe changed the world, maybe not, but they were part of something grand. Mm. And now, senselessly, they're gone. So there's no such thing as a statistic when it comes to death or number. Each death is individual, and each death is painful.
Yeah, it becomes personalized, therefore it becomes individualized, like you said. And I think that's it's an interesting perspective, because especially when it comes to 9/11, or like you said, or any tragedy, it becomes on a mass scale, it does become a number. And that number almost not desensitizes it. Obviously, it hits you in a grand way. Oh my God, 3,000 people. But it kind of gets lost in the shadows when you look at it from an individual approach. Obviously, my shadows are very obvious. I saw it as an individual thing, and it was both. It was, okay, I lost my dad, so I had that very in-your-face personalized experience. But then I had the experience, but there were still 3,000 other people. So there's like a yin and yang for having my experience, but realizing he wasn't the only one. So there's a balance of compassion, like, am I being selfish, this, that? But I knew I wasn't being selfish, but my father. So was that the biggest impact of walking through the rubble and seeing, well, I don't know what you'd explain what you saw, but that it made it more individual as opposed to this grand scale?
The personalization of each death was extraordinary. as death investigators, as mass fatality responders or managers, you're trained to think in terms of numbers because that's how you define your resources and your approach to the situation. How am I going to recover 23,000 body parts? How am I going to identify those people? How am I going to recover them in these extraordinary conditions when there's fire and smoke all around me? So you're trained to think that way, and that's the intellectual head. And then the emotional part of you, the heart sees the little personal things, wedding rings. Oh God, we had to take off the ring and check inside for initials because that helped us identify someone. Getting DNA from the families, to match to their loved one. That was so damn painful. And that also reversed, in a sense, the plans we had made. We were thinking victims, recover them, recover the pieces. And then in came the families. I have probably met your mother.
I was wondering that.
Yeah, probably, because we had the weekly meetings with the families to catch them up on our progress. I may have even met your father.
How?
I don't know. I worked recovering remains in the rubble.
Yeah. Like that.
Thousands of people. I don't know who I touched. I really don't. Could be 100 people, could be 1,000. And so what reversed for us was to stop thinking about the numbers and the victims in it as much as the families. That's who we're working for. The victim will get justice because we know that this was the biggest mass murder in U.S. history. But the families, they're the ones that need us the most right now. They need us to identify their loved ones and give them something to bury, something for closure. But also, we're there to give them the information about what happened because their imaginations were horrible. Did she burn? Was she frightened? Was she crushed? What happened? And with some degree of certainty, we could give people information. Was the death instantaneous, or did it take a little bit? We could sometimes give those figures to families. And horrific as that sounds, it was so much better than what they imagined. Because they imagined, 15 minutes of terror and pain. It wasn't like that at all.